So, good evening. I think it's evening now, no? Or not yet. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. This is the very last session of this year's Plus Rain Film Festival. And I want to thank you very much for being here. Those of you who have been for the first 2 days have shown very strong resistance and endurance. And for those of you who just landed or have not been able to follow the whole program, I would say that this session will be interesting for you since we have three guests that show this idea of knowledge transfer that we are committed with here at UPF. This means that we understand transfer as an interactive process, so 2 ways. And we have a guest who is Rainer Kohlberger, who is an Austrian-born artist who is based in Berlin and who just arrived this morning to Barcelona to participate here in this session, which we call the Summit. And Rainer is one of the artists who has been selected in this film festival. And we were able, for those of you who were there, we were able to see his piece in the theater of the Center of Contemporary Culture. And I must say that it was the first of the films in the projection. And there were people who were really overwhelmed by the sensorial impact of the work. So then we have 2 more artists today who are Anna Mundet. Anna is an artist, researcher, and activist who is a PhD candidate of the cinema group in the communication department. And for those of you who were lucky to be yesterday at Sala Arañó, we had this session that was a program with 3 live performances by different artists, and Anna was simultaneously producing a live documentary which was activated in, I would say, as a desktop film that was created in real time. So as you can see, Anna is doing a practice-based research which has a very strong experimental approach and very open. I would say that this is probably true for them 3. We are speaking about experimental art practice, which is at the same time a form of research and not necessarily related or not related at all with the classic idea of film or the film industry. And then we have Nick Evans, who is an artist and researcher of the Music Technology Group here at UPF, so on the other side of the street. And Nick is a person who is also interested in the research and experimental production, not only in terms of poetics and aesthetics, but also with a deep root in the development of software. And this means that some years ago, when we thought about this campus and the interactions between the engineering school and the communication department and other departments here, maybe we thought more about the engineering side, but it is true that there is a very strong and deep research which is rooted in mathematics, physics, and also in computer science. And Nick is one of the persons who is working as is it a postdoc position? A pre-doc position in the MTG, in the Music Technology Group. So the way in which we have thought about this session and always thinking that we want to keep it light as possible, knowing that the work itself is dense. So I don't want to add a lot to this presentation. We will allow them to have, give their impressions or their opinions or try to communicate their experience regarding art practice related to digital technologies, and maybe specifically, we would like to hear from them if they see something specific in this hyped and so-called artificial intelligence. And I would like to know also, in general, what is their not only aesthetic or poetic, but also political stand towards these new technologies, which nowadays I think we can clearly not compare to a blank canvas, which is neutral, but it is more than a technology, maybe a medium, which is very much determined by the big companies that are behind these technologies. So they are free to use their 10, 15 minutes each to either talk to you or present from their websites, previous projects or ongoing projects. So I hope that you enjoy, and I will give first the word to Reiner, since he's our guest coming from outside, so it's a matter of courtesy, and then we will have Anna and Nick. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for being here. Reiner.
Jumping into the cold water right away, but it would be nice to have some cold water in this heat. So what are we talking about? I think regarding your questions, I'm quickly just talking about how I arrived working in this realm over the years, and when I started creating my films and other images and sounds, like originally I come from creating installations, like with multiple projections, and sometimes interactive, but quickly I wasn't interested in that anymore, but rather it was really like this kind of like really immersing the spectator in something like that is very overwhelming. And I created these works always by a code. So it's a visual programming language that I used to create it more like music also, almost like it's, some people will know Maximus P, or the my software was called VVVV. It's like analog synthesizers, and you connect cables so you can see immediately what you're doing. And so this is my original practice, more or less. And the images were very reductive, very minimal, but at the same time, very maximalist. So there's always the flip side in this minimal maximum idea. And what that means is there was a lot of flickering, a lot of strobing, a lot of like drawing you in, and making you fixated somehow. And out of these installations, somehow they were already quite linear. Somehow I became more and more a filmmaker. It was not really planned, but what I really liked, like right at the time when I started my practice, cinema changed fundamentally from analog projection to digital projection. And what that meant was, with DCP projection that you have in cinemas, you have, in my opinion, you had like very good setup to show this kind of idea, like to present these kind of ideas that I had, because you have very bright projectors, and you have something that is high frame rate that was almost impossible with analog film, but yeah, and you have very precise way to work with light. That was like the other thing. It's like it's almost like light, working with light. And so reflecting upon myself, like what I'm doing here, like one angle is like just to do it, like, you know, just from kind of like a perspective of what I'm interested in and what I want to see myself, like, and I'm just doing what I'm doing, and like I'm happy with somebody also shares this interest. But then the other aspect of being an artist was always to question myself. Hey, what am I doing here? And like I'm reading a lot, of course, like everyone, and researching, and so it was always this kind of reading about phenomenology, for example, and from this aspect, or neurology and what is happening in the brain, and really reading historical texts, or also recent texts, because this field changes is still changing. Like finding out about the perceptual apparatus and what is going on in the brain, really, and also using this kind of research and what scientists find out about it, and incorporating it into my body of work. And then at one point, and what I have to, because the reason why I mentioned this kind of programming that I did with real-time software is I immediately saw what I'm doing. Like, it was real time. It was generative, it was real time, so there was never any rendering involved. I mean, there was rendering, but it was in the moment of what I'm seeing, and so it was very a fluid experience. And at one point, it was really like bam! It really happened quickly that these kind of machine learning algorithms appeared online in research papers. But as some of you might know, there is code available, because it's all based on research done by scientists, basically. Also, in the States, it's working like that. It's funded a lot by the big corporations. So even if it's by the big corporation funded, but it's still like you have to publish it. And I was immediately like transfixed, and so I always, it's not like I stay with my tools, but I always change. Like even if it was the real-time tools, I use a lot of different softwares, and so it was like completely the opposite. So you had to, I even had to buy a graphics card and all these things, and you program some code. Basically, I use code because it's beyond my understanding, but I used it, I changed it, and I programmed models. And so you have to wait for a whole night to just have a few seconds. And now it's a bit better, but it's still this kind of thing that I was interested in. Really using some machine learning algorithms, and I'm still using the term machine learning, but because I was never interested in something called artificial intelligence. Maybe, yeah, should I talk about it right away? How I led to this film was also, maybe I have to explain, how many minutes do we have left? You have used 4 minutes. 4? Okay, that's good. In this practice, so because I talked earlier about, I already did some research about like what's happening in the brain, about neuroscientific research and stuff, and then this came out, and all these analogies were drawn immediately between, like, this is kind of like intelligent, and this is like based on, of course, neurons. Like the idea, it comes from there, you know, like you program neurons and you make billions of them, and then it comes out, and with also with something that we might call intelligent. And so again, like a lot of reading about it, and then one film came out of this practice. It was the film before that one you saw. It was called "It Has to Be Lived Once and Dreamed Twice," and it was really about this idea of talking about the connection of technology with religion. Because what I found out was that this kind of like Californian ideology was really based very much on something like on a belief system, and you could really find it. A few of the things you could find it, whatever, like in a lot of different religions, and or the technology, when it is successful, it always has a connection to religion. Like you talk about the Vatican, it was once 500 years ago or 800 years ago, I don't know. It was the pinnacle of the world. You know, it was really the avant-garde. It was really like where you went to really where the intelligence was based. and now maybe it's Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, and like it's. I'm shortening a lot here right now, but it's fine. But then, so that was that film, and then afterwards, I made this film that maybe most of you saw, or some of you saw, The Electric Kiss, and it was again this this topic of like it's a meta film, clearly, as you might have realized, and it's. In some of my, I mean, there's a few films in between, so it's like not. I'm just mentioning the ones that are relevant right now, because what I'm doing is from the practice that I talked about earlier, where it's very minimal and very abstract, and not about anything that this event itself. Like in my practice as a filmmaker, the other kind of like technique I used was to study a genre. Like I just talked about, like in this film I just talked, it would be the genre of consciousness, more or less. Like what is consciousness over the centuries, and what it is now, and how is it connected to religious thought and these things. But then I also created a few films for the catastrophic, the disaster movie, for example. It's very interesting, like over the centuries, if you look at disaster films. And what I like about genres is that they stay solid, they stay static over the centuries. But then you look at them and you can read something about the political aspects about each century. Like in disaster films, like you can see really. The Reagan years in the States, like it's based on Hollywood films, so that's like it's like what also ended what over the years, like, or you could see really 9/11 happening. You know, it was a real-time disaster movie, and then afterwards, you know, you had it in Hollywood again, or how it changed it. And this to come to now The Electric Kiss. What I did was look at cyberpunk more, not just about cinema, but also about literature, and not really about cyberpunk as a whole because it's so diverse, but more like this kind of like nostalgia in cyberpunk, like this kind of like melancholia that is one aspect of it, and because the other angle was from a contemporary, like from us all now, and when I started making this film now, we have 2025, maybe it was 2020, around that time. And around the time it became really clear that once again our technology changed quite a bit, because when I started out when I was young and we had the 90s and everybody was so euphoric and positive and optimistic about this new technology of internet, and everybody is now a creator, and everything becomes democratic now. And 25, 30 years later, it became the opposite, and everybody was depressed about big corporations and silos and just a few actors having political power, and algorithms that are like the new tobacco industry that draw everybody in and make them addicted. And this stuff, it really became clear a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago, I think, because before social media was more like, everybody is now into conspiracy theories, but now it became, now I think they changed again with TikTok or whatever, Snapchat before that it really became this kind of like addictive technology. And that I wanted to talk about a little bit, looking at from that angle, but I didn't, because I'm not this kind of like, usually regarding technology, I'm myself, I'm not really the kind of like pessimistic type, and that was for me, it was a new kind of experience also to see, okay, no, this doesn't work out. Like where is Linux on every desktop? You know, like where is open technology? Why is it not happening? Why is it the opposite? And then I looked at, okay, there's a whole genre talking about these things, and they were like, so what I did was, and if I use text in my films, because that's also only my second film that I used language or text. In this film it was text, in the film before it was language. How I write these things, it is writing in quotes, so it's not like I'm coming up with all of these things. It's reading over the years and collecting a lot of things, and of course I'm changing them, and I'm it's like sorry, it's like collage work with different kind of authors, like and it's from everywhere. It's like it can be a tweet, it can be some philosophy, it can be some scientific paper in physics, whatever. It can be a news article, and so yeah, I think that's it so far. Did you follow? Okay. But I'm happy to talk more, like with the others later in the discussion and stuff. So,
that's the idea, of course. I am really fascinated, and it's impossible to try to summarize what you said, because each sentence was in itself a whole universe of ideas. But I would like to ask you about this, specifically the consciousness aspect. When I saw your film, I thought that there was something there about the transformation of consciousness that has come in the last 4 decades, or maybe 3 decades and a half, like a consciousness that is transformed by this multimodality and also by this hyperconnectivity. Do you relate to this, maybe in these last sentences that you were saying? I feel that there is something also generational in like feeling that as human beings we have been the first generation that has been deeply affected by this hyperconnectivity that came out of this internet. Not maybe the utopian internet that we imagined, but what it has really been and how it has affected our daily life. Do you feel more or less like as a consciousness that has this epocality or sign of a generation in it, or you don't think it has to do with this exceptionality, historical exceptionality?
I'm not sure how to answer that, because I mean the only thing that I grew up with cassettes and CDs and then whatever, and then so I still had like as you as well, for you too. I'm not sure if you. So definitely there changed something there, but it's more this. Like my films are streams of consciousness, so that is also like this kind of like this mode that you had. Of course, there's literature where it goes way back to, I don't know, 60s, where this term I think first time came up, where you have not anymore like just standard kind of storytelling, like really classical storytelling, but really like broken up and streams of consciousness, also in movies and films. I mean, I don't know if I understand your question the right way, but yeah, definitely I think technology always changes us in a lot of ways. I mean, because I think that's the most important thing to say, because we always think we create technology, but technology creates us, of course. If you look at factories, I mean, it's like who is the worker? Who was more transformed than the worker? It was, of course, the factory changing the worker.
I agree, and also I wanted to ask you a second question related to your first ideas. Is that one of your interest in neuroscience? I understand that it has not taken you into academic research, but it's part of your interest, and I think you can also feel that in your film. But the idea of working in a movie theater in which you said that it's like an instrument that is nowadays very precise in the, I would say, technique and art of, you said working with light or playing with light. Do you feel that there is this idea of your film being like a program which is to some point programming the audience in the film, in the movie theater through the film? Do you feel that it is like a software that uploads to the audience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The consciousness of the...
Of course, it's, I mean, I'm always afraid of this kind of like, because I don't want to have, I mean, let me answer it in that way. What I'm doing is in making it so obvious that I as a director have the power to draw you into a kind of state. I'm hinting at something that cinema has and has always had, this kind of power, like just more subtle usually, and with storytelling, it's also in other ways, but in creating these kind of films. And I didn't come up with this idea that I also have to mention, again, we go back to the 60s where filmmakers like Kubelka, who is Austrian, or Tony Conrads came up with Flicker film, and but the beautiful thing is it's all going way back to the very beginning of cinema, and the very beginning of cinema is not just theater, of course not, and it has a lot of origins, and one of the origins is the carnival, of course. But one of a very important one that a lot of people don't realize is the physiological laboratories in the 19th century, where they actually measured the body and looked how it worked. This was with Galvin, was it called, right, with the nerves and stuff, and also Pavlov was the rear end. And so this was kind of like where really the stroboscope and these kind of things were tested and also developed and with Münsterberg, for example, as well. And so they basically also referenced something way back, decades before, but transformed it to a new technology with 35mm film, which was also not accessible before that for artists. And yeah, so I think it's nice to have these kind of references to really also talk about the history of cinema, and that it's always been there. And what my transformation would be with digital cinema, that you have this even more. You can work with 60 frames per second, for example, or theoretically even more, but doesn't really make sense for me, maybe. And you have really, also the pixel ratio doesn't really matter so much. Like 2048 pixels is fine, but still it's kind of precise. You don't have the scratches anymore and stuff. Also, that's nice for some kind of cinema. You have the kind of flickering effect in the analog projector, which you don't have anymore in the digital realm. But then you work with it in some other ways.
Okay.
I think there was a question. No?
Thank you. There was a question from the audience?
I'm sorry.
Okay. So maybe since we are digesting the ideas that Rainer shared with us, if Anna wants to present, I think that she doesn't want to do it only with words, but she's going to use a presentation or something. So if you wish, Anna, I give you my microphone.
Yeah, can I do it from here?
Sure.
Maybe better with my mouse.
And also, I ask you to use the microphone since this will be
Okay, recorded. Yeah.
I take this other microphone, and you and I can see, and Nick as well. If we sit here, then we can see what Anna is presenting.
It's not super important, but I think I'm going to be better here with
If
my...
that's the way you want to do it, we're
I think it's
perfectly
fine.
fine.
That's like 5 images, so this is not... Doc, can you warn me when it's 5, 10, because I tend to take too long to speak. Okay, perfect. So yeah, I wanted to start with closer.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Merci. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to start with a personal anecdote. It's that I sometimes feel a strong urge to break machines, especially phones and computers. And I have this desire to switch off to disconnect, to take distance from technologies because they feel very overwhelming. But what I managed to discover is that the answer is not to escape or abandon them, but to stay with the trouble, as Donna Haraway would have said and would say, and ask how can we relate differently to these tools, and how can we question them, how can we hack them and make them serve us rather than the other way around. So I was starting with this drawing because there's this common misconception that being critical of technology means rejecting it altogether, but historical resistance movements such the Luddites here weren't anti-technology. They were against how it was imposed to exploit labor and life. So yeah, I believe that in this tension between needing technology and resisting its dominance is it's central for my practice because I'm a climate activist working primarily on what's called critical technology, digital degrowth, and raising awareness about the environmental impact of hyper-digitalization. So yeah, I'm also a digital artist, filmmaker, researcher on critical AI studies. So these technologies are in general very important in my daily life. And I work by thinking through images and producing these images. So what I try is to simply, not simply generate outputs and generate images, and to expose the limits, conditions, and contradictions of generating these images with technology. So yeah, that's more or less what I want to talk to you about today. So I wanted to start with a brief note on language. I think naming something gives it meaning, form, reality. Heidegger already said it, naming is our primary task. So I think let's not fool ourselves. Artificial intelligence is terrible naming for this technology because it's not intelligent, it's mechanical, it's protective, it's limited, and it's not artificial in the sense of being autonomous or self-generated. It depends on massive amounts of data and precarious labor, and it's not intangible, and it's not neutral, neither. So yeah, I think we need to start thinking about artificial intelligence, and I think we do, but I think it's important to find new words, because at the end it's just computation trained with data, fed by human labor and sustained by massive material infrastructure, and has an enormous environmental impact. That's very important. So we cannot understand artificial intelligence without talking about undersea cables, massive data centers, neo-colonial resource extraction of materials in the global south, ghost workers, micro-tasking. So yeah, I think with this naming and in general, there's this they are trying to make it invisible, but I think we're starting to see it, and we will see it more. So yeah, I think we need to take terminology and language and use it in our favor. So I think we can dismantle this black box idea of artificial intelligence and displace the magic to make room for the mechanics of machine learning, and use accurate words, concepts, dissemination that can bring us closer to the apparatus, to the process, to the materiality, and the technical and political decisions behind it. So yeah, how 5? Well, 3, okay. Okay, so yeah, I like to think of technology as an extension of my hand, of my thought, that allows me to execute ideas. I want technology to be useful to me. I don't want it to impose rhythms that doesn't suit me, or that limit me or steer me, steer a process I cannot control. So sometimes I need to remind myself that technology is a mediated form of listening and seeing, but it's not conscious, because sometimes I want to think with there's also magical thinking, and there's fiction, and there's poetics on thinking about consciousness. And yeah, so I think it's important to make this mediation explicit, to really like understand that the machine doesn't think, but produces responses we are interpreting as thought. And I really like how Yu-Q phrases it, because he doesn't talk about like collaboration with machines. He talks about co-emergence in human-technology relationships. And I think it's interesting to think about this process as a distributed process where decisions, actions, and effects are not fully controlled by a single agent. So yeah, thinking about understanding co-emergence as the idea that the machine doesn't think, but does have its own formal logic that can generate unexpected possibilities, and then we listen and interpret them. And yeah, so technology as a producer of effects, and these effects that are opening new meanings for us is how I like to think on my use of technology and technology in general. So yeah, mostly I work with stable diffusion, but I'm not a computer scientist, so my approach is not very technical. It's more creative and is also very critical. And one important thing about my approach is that I always try to make it collective. I try to surround myself with friends, with colleagues, with coders, and other artists who can help me. Because I think against techno-capitalist individualization, it's very important to call for collective work. And yeah, so I like to run the model locally. I think it's important offline, to do it slowly, to do it collectively. Slow it down as much as you can. I think that's something that I sometimes try to remember myself in everything I do in general. Also trying to tweak the model, adapt it to our needs instead of adapting myself to its rhythms. So yeah, I think I'm going to explain it a little bit more with my research for the thesis, but what I really like is to use the model against itself, if I can, so playing with this idea of using the model contrary to what it's meant to do, and seeing what possibilities you can open there. So yeah, so all of this, I try as best as I can because it's not always easy to apply in my artistic practice and the research I'm doing here at the university. I'm doing a practice-based PhD. I started in February, so I'm still at the very beginning. But I wanted to give some context to the project because I think it's a good reflection of how I work conceptually and practically with these technologies. So my thesis, I forgot about this, but yeah, so my thesis is based on the idea of a visual manifesto of ecological resistance for the algorithmic age. The objective is through artistic practice to think about and interrogate and explore new paths for a critical computational aesthetics that is ecologically sustainable. So in practice, what I do, or what I'm going to do in the next 3.5 years, is incorporate ecological constraints. That is what I call technical tactics, and visual dysfunctions, which I call formal tactics, into the production with generative models to create images and to think about them, contextualize them, analyze them, and research them within this new aesthetic proposal of ecological resistance. So now I'm going to explain a little bit the tactics I use or intend to implement in the coming years of my PhD. First, there's the formal tactics. These are interventions that directly impact the visual, the narrative, the rhythmic configuration of the image generation process. They aim to subvert dominant aesthetic codes and propose new forms of perceptual relation with the synthetic image. And I conceive them as symbolic resistance, so images that are capable of generating like a critical friction with the contemporary hyper-visual regime. The first one is image strike, so it means just abstaining from image generation, like stop the production. And yeah, I think it's easy, this one. Then the next one is the reuse of existing synthetic images. So repurposing remix culture, as we've done in the digital ages a lot, but repurposing visual archives that are generated previously. So this way you are not creating new images, you're using images that have been already created. And in this way you are like subverting this algorithmic obsolescence logic. Then there's the intentional synthetic glitch, so introducing these deliberate visual errors to critique the algorithmic perfectionism. And then you're like proposing a dysfunctional degrowth aesthetic. Then there's also playing with the visual the visibility regime of images, so erasing some elements, removing parts of the image to make visible what lies sometimes outside, and then you generate like a critical space for absences and things that we are not usually seeing. Then slowing down the generative process, that's an easy one, forcing latency, slowness as an artistic gesture, to recover attention, to pause, and connecting like emotionally with the image. Then using the model as a manual extension, I really like this one. This is like trying to integrate the model with an artisanal and deliberate process to reclaim agency. Here in the Motec project, they did that. They like trained a model to identify visual motifs, and all the training they did with like real images. They printed all of them. They used like big boards, and I think this would be like one use of this tactic, the model as a manual extension. Then there's degenerative feedback or self-destructive computation. This is feeding the model with its own images to promote this progressive degradation and collapse as a form of like internal critique of the system. And then this aesthetic hacking that would be like exploiting errors, hallucinations, visual biases to show the weaknesses of the system and generate more like absurd or unsettling images. And then very quickly, the technical tactics, these are the ones that affect directly the material, computational, and political infrastructure that support generative systems. And the goal here is to implement alternative production models that minimize ecological impact, decentralize technological control, and foster collective sovereignty. And this, I haven't explored this as I should, like I'm gonna do it like in the coming years, but it would be like local, offline execution, distributed training and inference, low energy networks and connectivity systems, collective reappropriation of production media, and free and open source software. So to make an idea of what it is. 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay, I'm gonna jump. Okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk like super quickly, 2 minutes, please. So yeah, for me it's very important, the process. So yesterday we did this desktop documentary for the Rain Live section, which precisely what it was aiming to do, it was interrogate and show images, annotations, references of the artist's processes that were performing, doing the musical performances. And Nick was one of them here too. So yeah, I think the documentary encapsulates many ideas of what I work on for the thesis also, and uses this, the technological resistance and the empowerment work that the artists were doing that performed yesterday. So I just was trying to open up their experimentation processes, how they test the models, how they disconnect, they slow down, they deprogram, they try to use older models too. So yeah, so I think kind of like the things I want to do, they were also doing it their way with their models and their technologies. And yeah, so I think the format I choose, the desktop, of which I'm a big fan, I think it's very important because it's the act of showing your desktop live. I think it's also like a political gesture of this openness, of this, procedural transparency, like saying I'm not just going to show the results. I'm gonna give space for the process. So it's like it could be seen as opening the black box, turning this interface into a political, a material space where there's also non-hierarchy between windows, browsers, cameras, terminals, visual sequences. And there's like this kind of real-time mental process in which the desktop is both a reading and a writing surface of thought and composition. So yeah, I think in this sense, time is also important. So yeah, using a desktop yesterday meant showing process in real time and insisting on this rhythm, on how we think, we search, we associate, we test, and we fail, and how we can do that slowly too, because these, like the errors, the indecision, the slowness, the conflict, the insecurity are part of artistic processes, and sometimes they disappear using these technologies. So yeah, I think it's also important to reclaim them when working with these technologies. Yeah, time. I have a little bit more, but yeah, maybe for the questions.
It's time, but please, can you translate to English the title or this?
Oh yes. The title is who runs the machine when the choir sings. Yeah, it's the title of the documentary. It's going to be available in next week, maybe. I don't know when.
You don't know exactly when.
Okay. So yeah, but you can access the program and see who are the artists playing. Everything is on the web.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Okay.
I give you the mic.
Thank you very much, Anna. And maybe I introduced Nick. Well, I already introduced him. I think he has also his presentation almost ready. And while he prepares, I would like to say that my idea is not imposing some fixed questions for a colloquium, but expecting that if the audience has any comments, doubts, questions, and can relate to the practices that have been briefly presented here, it would be nice to hear from you first. This is basically because I would like to say that maybe when working in a festival, even though it's like a research film festival and it's a lot of room for presentations and discussions, sometimes I feel that the discussions that are proposed from an academic point of view are not always the most relevant, and probably it is an opportunity for us to hear from other voices which come from outside academia also, and ask from their standpoints what they see in these art practices that have been presented here. So whenever you're ready, Nick.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm Nick Evans. I'm a researcher here at the MTG, as Rock has already said. I'm working with the Multimodal and Music Interaction Lab. And basically my research is focused on live generative performance systems. So I thought it would be useful to maybe just go over some of the recent work that I've been doing, maybe some of the thought behind it, and then I think later on maybe we'll get more into the overarching concepts of using generative systems or AI in a creative practice and what that means and what are the implications of that. But for this presentation, I'll keep it not too technical, but just go over what I've been doing. But I guess I would like to start just by saying, being in the engineering department, I feel like sometimes there's this idea that you're advancing certain technologies or doing research without giving much forethought to what is the purpose or what will be the ultimate use for this. And I think it's important, as somebody in academia, to keep that at the forefront. I think over the years, the older I get, the more of a tech pessimist I become, because it's just so clear how so many of these technologies are used and commercialized and really captured by big corporations, and who ends up suffering from that. And typically, it's the worker. We see it a lot with AI, and it kind of creates this conundrum for myself, even working with this technology at all. Whether I think the work that I'm doing is, responsible. I kind of don't like that terminology either, talking about like responsible AI or ethical AI. I think it kind of, tries to wash away some culpability of what's going on. But anyway, with all that prefacing, I can get into some of the work that I've been doing. Whoops. So let's see. So I think we can start with this quote by Rob Horning, because he talks about generative music, and I think when people hear generative music nowadays, what they think about are these large-scale text-to-music models. In reality, of course, generative music has been around much longer than that. I mean, you can trace it back hundreds of years, depending on your definition of generative. But I think it's useful to start here and maybe frame my research around this as well. But anyway, Rob Horning says that he foresees a perceptual shift and more passive engagement with music as an art form. And he argues that these large-scale text-to-music models invite us to see music not as made, but as described, narrated, emerging not in the friction between performers and their instruments, and between their imagination and their talent and dexterity, but in the spontaneous, whimsical act of curiosity. So I do agree with the overall analysis here, but I think it also starts to bring up some other questions just about what does kind of constitute a creative practice. Is this idea of this frictionless sequence from ideation to final sort of like high fidelity output? Does that make sense for a creative practice? Is there creative value in that, or is it kind of just this sort of ultimate commercialized dream of companies that would otherwise have this expense for artistic practice? So with that said, my research is primarily centered around like live performance tools, and part of that is also just an anticipation of I don't know how music will be perceived in the future when we're already being fed, algorithmically generated, music on your Spotify playlists, where it's not coming from a human creator, and for sure you don't realize it. There's songs that I probably would be like, this is quite nice, and I wouldn't realize it. But I think losing that value, or I don't see it as necessarily a good thing. And so as more and more of these types of songs and these songs that are generated by huge models kind of flood the music market or streaming services, I think there might be kind of like a pushback to focus more on something happening in the moment, like live performance, where you know what's being done on stage is coming from a human in that moment. And I'm not even making claims about the value between one or the other. I just think that there will be more of a desire in the future to kind of see this process work out and not just have something fed to them where you don't know the source or the creator. It's losing. To me, it seems like it loses something. So moving on, I can talk about my first project that I completed as a master's student here. This is a Eurorack module. It's can be used as part of like a larger audio synthesis environment that's very flexible. So you'll have different modules perform different functions. So you'll have maybe a sound source, you'll have some effects, you'll have modules that can control parameters on other modules. And in the context of that, this would be considered like a sequencer, essentially. So it keeps things in time with everything and defines the kind of the sequence of events in which things occur. So in this Eurorack module, we're using a generative drum model, generative drum model developed by my colleague Behzad Haki, also at the MTG. And basically, this drum model was trained on hours of live drumming. And it takes into account the dynamics of each drum hit, the micro timings, so it's precise timing. So it means the grooves that are generated by this model kind of have this, more natural quality. And what's nice about this model as well is that it can be conditioned on your own live performance. So if you're playing some sort of MIDI instrument or like a keyboard, your keyboard can condition this model, and then the model will generate a rhythm that is somehow similar to what you're playing. So, thinking about this, I can look at it in a couple ways. In one way, it might sound like it's not necessarily maybe the type of use that I would want when I look at it, just initially, where it seems to be like, oh, well, it's just meant to replace a drummer. But it's not really the case, because we're not trying to replicate a human. It's more kind of just like trying to be a continuation of more traditional algorithmic music, where we're generating these algorithmic sequences, but it's up to the artist to apply them in a way that makes sense for their practice. So even though it's technically generating what could be considered drum sequences, the artist has to define like those musical semantics accorded with the sequences. So it doesn't have to be a drum hit. It doesn't have to be even a sound source. It could be sequencing other operations within a larger environment. So that's kind of the core theme of a lot of the things I do is not to create these systems that try to just like make a nice automated process. It's more about making tools that like maybe do retain some friction in using them, or do require maybe quite a bit of work on the artist to define what the ultimate output is. Because in this case, maybe I should have mentioned earlier, these sequences, it's only symbolic. There's no audio coming out of this module, so you're not getting any sound. There's no music unless you're sequencing something else. So with that said, I could have shown this, forgot about that. But this is just a quick visual. So you get your performer input, and then you get what could be a multi-voice drum pattern on the other side. But again, this is just symbolic, so it's up to you to use these rhythmically correlated sequences as you see fit. And as I was saying, we want to develop flexible systems that do require some thought about what is the purpose of this system. So in this case, with this rhythm generator, we ended up using it in a much larger system where it would be responsible for the rhythm generation, but we were also able to add a harmonic component to this. So just starting off with the system, on the left we have the main performer. So the performer plays some melody or sequence on the keyboard, and that's simultaneously sent to the rhythm generator and this Markov model, which is on the bottom. by doing this, we're basically, injecting harmonic content into these rhythms that we're generating based on what the performer is playing. So these are trained in real time. It doesn't require like a data set beforehand. It can be done during the performance, essentially. So once we generate the harmonic content and the rhythm, we can then send it to these output controls and control the generation once more before finally outputting it to however many channels of external instruments you have. In this case, the device supports up to 10. And we first used this system for a show at Palau in Barcelona. And it was part of this organic series, which basically allowed musicians to play the main organ in Palau and then also use these smaller portable MIDI organs. So over the show, we had Raul Refre playing the main organ, just doing a full performance as he would, sending his performance to the system, and then the system would be controlling these smaller MIDI organs and kind of providing like a live accompaniment based on the rhythm and the harmonic content of what he's playing. So this was kind of a nice use of the system in that we never really thought of the original rhythm generator for this use. Luckily, it was flexible enough to be able to like insert into this sort of show. And this is what spurred the original development of the system to begin with. Next, this is what the project we performed last night with my friend Neus. We made use of the system again, but in this case, we expanded it out a bit. And instead of using just one accompaniment organ, we could now use 10 channels to output to. So these are just like the final kind of output controls of the final harmonic sequences that we were getting. It's just like another layer of kind of like algorithmic control where we're doing different voice sequencing for these 10 channels. So you can see the first 3 channels, or the first 2 channels are going to 2 different pianos. We have some channels for pads, sub, synthesizer, sampler, noise. So it just kind of creates this much fuller kind of output, but it still leaves a lot of space for artist input and also artist error, as it happened a bit last night. But just to kind of quickly go over some of these algorithms, and then I think I'll be done. We have these algorithms on the left that just define like how the note is directed to a channel. So when it generates a note, it can be sent to any one of these 10 channels. So it could be sent to the pads, to piano, to the sub, but it's based on whatever this algorithm is chosen on the side. So if you choose the first one, which is probability, you can set the probabilities for each channel, and then it will randomly select based on those probabilities to output the note to. Next, we have the round robin, which is just doing it in sequence, each channel one after the other. We have this weighted sequence where it based on the weights that you set, so these numbers, the big numbers you see going across, based on that, it determines some sequence with each channel represented proportionally by the weight that you set. This avoid recent is probability-based, avoiding repeats. We have random sequence, which just randomly selects a channel to output to. And then we have the step repeat, where you define how many times a step repeats before it moves on to the next step. And then finally, we have some controls at the bottom here. And this just controls octave transposition of the notes. So if you're always playing in, maybe one octave, this allows the system to then generate like a wider range of output octaves. So you can have lower notes, higher notes, even if the main performer is staying within, you know, a very small range. And then finally, we just have some controls for note duration down here. So yeah, essentially, this is what I've been doing recently. In the future, I would maybe like to begin exploring more with audio. I have a colleague in MTG, Błażej Katowski, who's doing a lot with like different audio, like network bending, like breaking some of these audio models, you know, doing different feedback and you know, trying to misuse these models rather than you know, get what was maybe initially intended. So that's all from me, and looking forward to talking more.
Thank you very much, Nick. I think no, I can do it. Maybe I was thinking about this last part in which you were talking more about like more unexpected results, or you want to sit in front and or even like, I think that really the way in which you work as an artist and engineering challenges most of what we think that engineering does. And this makes me think about your work as something which is related to creating your own ethics instead of being always open and available for an external client to come and ask. And I think that this is like an attribute that has usually been a space that artists thought that was its own space. But probably it's a very good, and it's very good news for me to see that it is also part of the ethos of a new way of understanding engineering. What I would like to ask in general to all of you is if in your years of school or higher studies, you felt that the educational institutions where you were promoting this idea of developing your own ethos, being the owner, or being working out of your own motivation instead of preparing you to be available for possible customers to come and ask you. I always tend to make a very cartoonish division between art and design as opposed sides of a coin, but I don't know if from your experience, you, Rainer, or Anna, or had like, were you, did the educational institutions where you were promoted that you developed your own work ethic or not?
For me, it's been too long ago. I've always had it. I only can say I've always had it in me somehow to like be in. It's really based in some kind of, you have to have this interest, this kind of really to dig deeper, and it like the connection would be to also when it comes being just a recipient of, let's say, art, let's say music in specifics, that like most of people are fine, they turn on the radio, or today it's Spotify or whatever, the TV, and it's the so-called mainstream, if you still want to talk about the mainstream, because that's also changed now since a few years with the bespoke algorithms, but still, like, most people are fine with it. But then, you know, there's always these kind of people on the edges, and they dig deeper, and, you know, for me, I can say that started when I was quite young, like a teenager, and then, you know, you start with Nirvana, and then you find out, okay, but he had a T-shirt of Sonic Youth, and who's that? And then, you go dig deep, and then at one point you end up with Merzbow. somehow like with noise to cut it short, but I think it really has to be in each and everyone's personality as well to have this kind of like interest. I don't know where that stems from precisely, if it's just your upbringing or if it's your environment or whatever. Like for me, I didn't have any of those, like just somehow I was interested in it. And I think but I know, I think enough academic institutions who have this as a core practice, I think, where you really like, yeah, or that's cool. I don't know about this institution, but I would say, I don't know, but at least from, I've been out of academia for a long time now, but I had the feeling that it's going on.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd say that I don't think there's like this huge like division between art and design. I feel that sometimes learning, and I felt that here studying, because I did audiovisual communication here, then the master's and now the thesis, like everything. But I studied philosophy before, and here it felt like learning how to, in my case, learning how to produce images in a more like traditional commercial way, open up the possibility to tweak that and then start like filming in a more experimental way. So you need to learn like the common way to try to do things the other way around. So I think there's like some joy in knowing how to do things, yeah, like on a more traditional path and like following the steps or following like the industry, the canonic way of producing images and filming, and then trying to experiment with other, like, I felt here the space to do that. I think so, and now with the PhD too, maybe what I lack is the means in my case, because I have a lot of ideas and I'm going more for the creative, like the philosophical, like I want to do all these things. Now I need to understand how I can do that and which are my possibilities, and if I have the tools or with whom I need to work with. That's what I think lacks, maybe more like a technical, I would appreciate like learning more on the tools to then decide, yeah, I'm gonna use this tool and this one, I'm gonna use them this way. But I think the possibilities are here. Like there's the space to do it. Maybe we need more tools to do that.
Before Nick answers, when I think about yesterday night at Sala Arañó, there were more than enough tools. I mean, there were no outlets left to connect anything else. So yes, of course, maybe we need more, but...
No, I meant more like learning how to use the tools, not the tools in fact. Like, I know the tools are there, but maybe sometimes I lack I had to learn by myself. Like here in this school, like in my bachelor's, I didn't know, like I learned to code by myself. So I think that would be nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. So your question was, do we feel like we've had the space to kind of pursue our own path in academia?
Yes, if academia was very castrating or professionalizing in the sense of pointing your knowledge into a very direct or a direction that was very practical or not?
Yeah. Well, I think in my case, I have been fortunate to be in a situation that I do feel I do have that freedom to some extent, based on my lab and my supervisor. But in general, I think maybe with the engineering school, there's more pressure that your output is deemed, an advancement of the technology in some way, and more like practice-based PhDs are not really accepted, which is maybe unfortunate. And so I guess in that way, I have been in a fortunate situation, but there always is this underlying pressure to be able to complete the PhD, like that I'll need to have papers published, and how do you get papers published, and who's deciding what papers are published? So there's always that aspect to it too, and you can kind of combine that with the fact that I think, unfortunately, sometimes academia allows some of these bigger companies to come and be the voice of what they deem is like, what does ethical AI mean? That they get to come and they give the presentation and they get to be the thought leader, which is something that I think should definitely be fought back against. I don't think there's reason for these sorts of companies to be on an academic campus talking about ethics or culture. Maybe it makes sense for some technical presentation, but when it comes down to that, I'm very suspicious, I guess, of that. I mean, obviously, but yeah.
Since I assume that you three do not relate directly as practitioners to what they call creative industries, could we say, or do you relate to the idea of counterculture as a reference of what your work is about?
Yeah, definitely from where I'm coming from, but the whole idea of, I mean, more like counterculture, maybe subculture was rather the term with, or underground, it was still around. And I don't have the feeling that there is still an underground. Now, I think it could be a time, I don't know, it's more like your generation, maybe there has to be a new underground. I'm always waiting for it, but it's kind of like, I don't know where, I mean, maybe, what happened is in the last few decades that the most niche thing can be experienced worldwide. So per se, it's you don't have, you have something, or the road from something very small and very niche and very experimental also happening and it's online, and from there to pop, it has been gotten shorter and shorter and shorter, and pop, like the way it's in its capitalist manner, it's happening that it can incorporate it very quickly, and it can eat it, and so I don't know. I think maybe it's over. So it's like that's how we are caught up in this kind of like cultural realm now. But I'm still waiting with, like, if you going on with this thought and what we've been talking about earlier today, where maybe I don't know where it's going, but now with we have now for the first time a separation between the United States and Europe. So there's been talk in Europe that we need to take really care about our own technology, and we have different kind of ideas. I mean, we've started with the Digital Rights Act and stuff like that, and it has to be even pushed further. And at one point, maybe it really separates again, and then you don't have, I don't know, just Facebook and Meta or Google and stuff, and all these companies dictating what we're seeing and taking over like everything basically. Like, so I don't know, and then that why I mentioned that is that maybe if it's still like if the pressure is just too high and we're like too many people are, like one way would be a dystopia, like completely like cyberpunk, and really like, okay, the corporations won, and this is it's depressing and like whatever. But another optimistic or more like punk idea would be to really create a real opposition and to really not do it anymore. And I mean, and from time to time, like for example with Twitter, it was like this thing. Okay, now we are off Twitter. Of course, you can't do it anymore. But with Meta, it's really really hard to not participate in their algorithmic system. I mean, and I respect everyone who does. And for me, for example, I couldn't. I'm still using that. but maybe if I don't know if the pressure is too high or if, but this whole thinking, like to come to an end, this whole thinking of mine comes from growing up in the 90s, where we had this kind of opposition still going on. You know, you had you clearly had this. There was this bands, okay, and you know they were shit because you know you don't listen to them. But then it comes to pop, you didn't have to. But the whole idea of it grew so big. But now that's so. Oh no, forget the sentence. No, but what I want to say, this whole thinking, maybe it's. I don't know where to go with that because that's been a question for me since many years now, and maybe it's just that I have an old mindset for the whole thing, and it's not happening anymore. That could also be the other option. You know, there is no subculture, there's no underground. I mean, there are subcultures online, there's en masse, but the whole idea, like the whole mode, is the exact same mode as the mainstream. You know what I mean? Like they have the same servers, they have the same systems. That there's no little service that you own yourself. Nobody's doing that. You use so. I don't. Maybe it's a bit. I widened it very much now, the whole topic. But these are the angles that I've come up with thinking about this stuff in the last 2 years. Maybe you have, from your perspective, more positive thoughts.
Maybe counterculture related to your practice, but also digital sovereignty or technological sovereignty, which you didn't mention, but I think it's behind what you were.
Yeah, of course. I think it's a difficult question, and I don't think it's like an old way of thinking or a new one. Or I think I don't want to be naive with it, but at the end of the day, for me, it's like why I'm doing what I'm doing, and for whom I'm doing it, and which is the ultimate purpose of all of it. And yeah, when I said I don't want to be naive because, as an artist, you still want to pay the rent, and you still want your films, in my case, or whatever you're doing, to be somehow in the market or to gain something out of it, so you can still like live out of it, or maybe you need to find a way to not be there. But it's so difficult to not be inside these dynamics. For me, it's more like. Yeah, decision for me. I don't have social media. I don't want to be in it. I don't want to do auto-promotion of my work. I just want to do what I'm doing because I believe in it. And I think sometimes it's naive. Also, it's maybe a little bit too radical. But in this space, as a researcher, I do have a scholarship for 4 years for my PhD. So now I can do that. I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 4 years, but that's has been the way I found to still be able to do the things I want to do, and maybe get some money from like cultural, like very small cultural institutions. Now I have a scholarship for producing like a film, and it's from Donas Visuals. That is like it's a place that I'm very happy to receive their money. Like I'm okay, yes, I'm gonna do this because I really believe in it, and they are not asking me to do anything I don't want to do, and it can be very experimental. It's very open. So if you can find this spot, I think you're lucky, and you can still be like forcing the system or working like against it. But if not, I do understand that you are just like saying, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do whatever. Maybe I'm gonna do this project, and I'm gonna get this money to do my other projects, and this is how it's gonna work. But it's impossible to be like, to fight it like all the way and be perfect in it, and like be like follow your ideals until the last. Yeah, I think it's very complex. I don't know if I'm answering, but I think that's how I approach it. And you digital sovereignty? What? I don't know. I didn't. Like,
Technological sovereignty, yes. Thinking about your position regarding not a Luddite, but someone who is not embracing technology as it comes, as a commodity, as with all its environmental and social unsustainability. Is that something that we have to consider nowadays, countercultural, being resistant to all this?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is a position where you are not like but it's not an artistic position. It's more like an activist position. I think everyone can do this. I didn't have for 6 months, I didn't use a smartphone. I used like an old phone, and I was really happy with it. But at the same time, I had to like switch again because reality was imposing, because there was no, like, socialization was impossible. Like, I couldn't get to places. If I had to go to a conference, I would get lost in a city. So I was I was using maps and like paper maps. So I was living like maybe this old school experience again, and it felt like I felt calmer, and it was good to not be connected all the time. But at the same time, I felt very, very lost and very isolated. So sometimes fighting this, maybe it's not the right option for you, neither.
I'll say something to that, because I think it's very important. I mean, or at least for me, I think it was always very important. Like, there was this accelerationist idea a few years back, at least the left accelerationism before the libertarians came in and whatever, took it to a whole different bullshit level. But it was this kind of like utopia again. It was like this, but we have to embrace it, we have to like accelerate it, and we have to really take it and really use more technology, like because it connects to what you said. There was not we need more tools, like more cables to check in, not less. But of course, it's a bit naive, it's a bit utopian stuff. But I think it's always like it's rather the thinking rather has to be to re-own, like to understand it really, and to re-own it, and this. I mean, it's also like when it comes to digital technology, this thought is also not new, and it's not just since the big corporations now around, but since the very beginning, or at least since Linux came out, like the free and open source software, like these guys from the late 80s. They really started thinking about that. And unfortunately, right now, some of it is very successful because every server runs on Linux. And there's this big community, especially in academia, that on the whole world talks together. Like even Chinese people talk to American people. And like to make it too simplified, but I always have this problem with like saying, no, I don't use it anymore, because that's not how it works. And that is like, we have this in the world, and it's like there's some aspects productivity, it's becoming higher and higher, because there's like these things work really well for a reason. The thing is like what is one layer below. And one layer below is capitalism, and like how these companies earn their money with advertisement. And maybe we should have laws against advertisement and this stuff. And if we talk about monetization of these things, because then and addictive algorithms and these things, there has to be laws and regulations, I think. But to have map technology on a smartphone, talk to somebody 50 years ago, and it's like, of course it's magic. And it's great. We shouldn't use paper maps anymore. It's bullshit. It's really bullshit. No, it's so much better. Of course, and we shouldn't be too sad about what we have. Like the sad thing is who earns the money, I think, and by which means, and by
While Anna and Nick add something, I want to keep my promise to pass the word to the floor. So let's keep it very short, because we are already in time for finishing the session.
Yeah.
So very, very short, please.
Just like super, super short. I wasn't like saying that we need to like all use like paper maps, but what I think it's important is that when you use a paper map, you are, for me at least, that I was not born with like phones, but phones were in my life early on. You start to look around you, and you start to know, this street, and then you remember that to go to university you need to take this and not that, and then you are more connected to space. And I think that's something we could try to practice, each one of us, not to not use Google Maps anymore, maybe sometimes to be less dependent on it, and then to look around you. I think that's, it's like an experiment, it's like an artistic practice.
Quick recommendation. I just read a book about Alex Hutchinson. He's a sports scientist for whatever, sometimes New York Times, Atlantic, and The Outside magazine. And he's a runner, but he used to do it a bit professionally, but now he's older, and what he's been doing is orientation running. So I can recommend it maybe to you, because he talks about these things, and you really have to navigate with different means. You get a map, and you have to run. So that's one system of the brain. But then you also have to access different points on the map, and you have to communicate with your colleagues. So it's one thing that immediately when you talked about it, it was like, because when I read the book, it was like, oh yeah, this is something maybe to try out. Just like.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wants to add something? There's people like Wozek that was mentioned earlier by Nick, or I don't know, whoever wishes to add something. Wozek. Please. Thank you.
I can add something. Actually, well, I could relate to a couple of things, but I want to nitpick on the maps, maybe, since it's the most recent one. I mean, I think I'm not sure if we shouldn't be sad about the paper maps or not. I mean, this is a personal choice. I think it's an individual thing. I just want to push back a bit against this narrative that, like, having maps in the smartphone is something better than having paper maps. I mean, I use Google Maps as well. I use maps to navigate. I recognize how convenient it can be, but I would maybe connect a bit to what Anna, was saying before, that I think it's a matter of the choice, and like if we don't have the choice, it's becoming problematic. So if the reality imposes on you that you have to use this technology because of the narrative, and talking about counterculture, I mean, to be in a counterculture, I think it's also constructing counter-narratives, no? I think the only reason why we cannot use paper maps is because we are all like subjected to this narrative of productivity, speed, efficiency, and so on. So actually getting to a place now has to be quick, as if like we couldn't take some extra time to actually, live life, for example. Which is all the things that Anna is mentioning, like connecting to the reality around and like experiencing it in a different way. So I'm just like trying to push back a bit against this thing that like there's only one path, one trajectory that we can go that's determined. It's like the progress, and we should be embracing the progress no matter what it entails, no? Because actually like using this technology entails way more beyond the outcome and like the augmentation of like the improvement to our life. Like what are the consequences behind having this technology? So like perhaps if we incorporate a bit of like a broader perspective, then suddenly we can maybe start appreciating the paper maps once again. And it's not to say that we should be resigning from the digital technology.
And now I just realized there is like an intersection of these two topics that you've been talking about, because there is the practice of counter mapping, and maybe when we have one dominant technology that is showing you like this is the one map, and everybody like looks at this map when they're looking at the map, whereas like before we had maybe smartphones or Google, there is like thousands of maps, and also before there is maps there is space, and like you don't have to look at the one representation. There's like kind of like very monoculture of like territory, what is territory, what is space, blah blah blah. So I like this freedom of like looking away from it for a moment too. I'm also advocating. Yeah. Well.
Thank you very much for that, since I really believe that there is this revival of the situationist ideas that maybe are nowadays more radical than when Guy Debord presented them, thinking about all what can be done in terms of breaking the narratives of productivity and efficiency, and that is going completely countercultural if we think about the prevalent role in mainstream culture of what this AI wave is imposing, which is more productivity, more acceleration, etc. I don't know if we have...
But can I say something to the last? I mean, it's because it's nagging me. First, I mean, the second aspect of it is that we had different kind of maps. I think with OpenStreetMaps, for example, we have exactly this kind of way of having a complete, like a collective mapping technology like never before. Because maps, I mean, I don't know how we ended up here, but I think it's a great view on the political aspect of cartography. Like I would now like to read a book about like where is the history of who decided which kind of maps were drawn and like who started this. And I know one example, Humboldt cartographing South America, something like whatever. There's this famous cartography.
Colonial endeavor.
Colonial
and
endeavor,
military
yeah.
endeavor.
So it's like it's a great example. But then also, I don't know who. And then, if you want to use paper maps, but who told you to use paper maps? You know, you can go one level below and say, okay, I don't use maps anymore. And then at one point, I mean, what do you do? I mean, of course, I don't know. I think this is a bit nonsense to say, no, we can't embrace a direction and a progress. This is kind of like, this is a bit sad, I think, like, because I'm like this modernist idea, of course, it has a lot of problems, but to say we're not building, I mean, that's what you know, this another example is music tool. It's digital technology now, and it's a great improvement to analog things. What you can do there, I mean, quicker. You can then make software. You can then make boards and create hardware modules out of it if you like, and sell them and whatnot. But to prototype and stuff, I mean, there's clearly a vector. I think. I mean, I don't know. I have a problem with this kind of like, oh no, we have to decide.
But we have the right to opt out in any case.
No.
We don't? I mean,
I don't know.
You have the right not to play Pokemon Go, but you know that Niantic is developing the technology for the drones that are
opt out of opt out of. I mean, sorry to no. This was a bit confrontational, and I don't really think
it was. But
I think opting out of a vector that's a layer deeper is not really possible. I think, of course, you have to like, you can decide, okay, no, I definitely don't want to use Google Maps, of course. I mean, that would be a great thing to do, and just use OpenStreetMaps. But, you know, but not using this kind of technology, I don't know. Can I say something else? I mean, talk about money, why we still have cash. And for me, it's like, why do we still have cash? So many people are used to have cash, but it's literally paper. And somebody came up with the idea of arguing, okay, we agree that this has value on paper, like a number on a paper, and now people still want to use this technology. I personally don't get it. And I don't know, technology improves, you know, we have to come up with something else. And if it's about money, it's even bigger than maps, and we have to quickly come up with some kind of public money, like something that really makes sense in a regulatory sense, so we don't end up with something stupid like Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Like, anyways, it's the next political thing.
And probably it's also something that is thought-provoking, but also very much biased by the European experience. I mean, there's a lot of cash economy in many other countries, and there is many human experience that do not depend on taking voluntarily the tracking device whenever you start walking out of your home. So, Nick, I don't know if you want a last chance, or Anna.
Do you use Google Maps or? I do too. And I just want to say I do love cash too. So I'm sorry.
I want a t-shirt of that. I love cash by Anna Mondet. Thank you very, very much for being here. We really appreciate that you have been here with us and for your patience. And thanks to you three as excellent guests. We close this year's Plus Rain Film Festival. We have only the screening session tomorrow at Sala en Construcció. And if you are visiting from any other part in the world, welcome to Barcelona. Benvinguts a Catalunya, and thank you for coming. See you.